Hello, I'm Chrissy with Green Living Off Grid. Here I have my 2 new garden beds that I'm working on. I just put these in. Last year I did some base garden soil at the bottom. You can see the horse manure on the top. I've let it sit all winter long. It's spring now. We've had a good 6 months of this drying out this horse manure, so it gets a chance to kind of work into the soil over the winter. When snow falls, it kind of works in. And so we've got a pretty good little, as you can see, it's pretty flaky, and it will break apart nicely and provide somewhat of some nutrients for the plants, and could also work as a topsoil or a top kind of cover for your plants. So I always like to put a little horse manure in the fall and kind of overwinter my beds with that. Now my beds need a little bit more soil. As you can see here, this one, it's only about half full, and so I have the manure on the bottom, but I'm also putting some garden soil in. I got a sale at Home Depot and got these about half price today. So I'm going to layer on top that manure with a little bit of topsoil, and really makes it great for planting your plants in it. When you're starting your beds and putting in new beds, that's what I do. And the other thing you can do to help cut down on weeds is layer at the very bottom of your bed when you're putting it in. Of course, dig out the old soil, and you want to kind of put a layer of cardboard. That can be helpful to cut down on the weeds coming through your bed. But I didn't actually do that here because I have some plants that are going to need more depth in their roots. And so I just dug the soil down and put my, of course, garden soil at the bottom. But I also didn't want to put a barrier in there because I didn't want to have trouble with those roots not being able to go through it. If you have a lot of rodents, like mice or moles or ground squirrels, they like to dig in beds. What I've done in the past as well is in addition to building my beds a little bit deeper to help accommodate more garden depth, but I've also put a wire mesh at the bottom of my beds, and that's been really helpful in those areas when I had a lot of property and I had a lot of ground squirrels that were going in and out of my bed. They would dig in my bed and I'd see them start a hole, but they would soon abandon it when they couldn't get through the wire mesh at the bottom of the bed. So if you have a lot of ground critters, that's a good way to deter them without having to put, other kinds of apparatuses to keep them away. So I actually just used the wire mesh, and I had really not that much trouble with the ground squirrels that way. So those are some things that you can do if you're going to start a garden bed. And something else I would discourage you from doing, you can do this, but I discourage you from doing it if you can get access to horse manure or chicken manure, rabbit manure. Those are all really good manures to have in your garden. But sometimes you just don't have access to that, and you can go to the store and get a organic compost. I do discourage from using that. If you can get by with something that's more natural, I found out a lot of the so-called organic compost is decomposed city slewer, stuff that has possible pharmaceuticals in it. I actually bought some of those bags in the past. I found some kind of like a, I don't know what it is, but it was like a stringy substance in the bags that I bought. And I was like, what in the world is this? When I found it was city slewer recycled into these so-called organic compost bags, I decided not to use that. And I went to horse manure, and it's always worked great. I've used horse manure for probably 6-7 years now to add nutrients to my bed, going totally organic that way and not having to rely on synthetic city slewer compost, so-called organic compost. And it's really worked well. Another thing you can do for your new beds is to add sphagnum peat moss. That's a really good substance to kind of add some aeration. We have a lot of clay in Colorado. The clay gets into the soil, makes it very hard and compacted. So when you have something like sphagnum peat moss, that's a great compost to add in to your brand new beds as well. So whenever possible, get garden soil. If you can't do the bags, they're more pricey. If you have, a means of getting a flatbed truck full of good garden soil at something like Pioneer Sand or some big place that has actual garden soil, that's another way that you can fill a bunch of beds. I've done that in the past, got a trailer full of it. So there's a lot of options for replacing the soil in your beds with a good garden compost, a garden soil, and then sphagnum peat moss for, adding a little more aeration to your soil, then horse manure, and then a good topsoil, garden soil at the very top, and you're all set for a summer-long growing season with really good garden soil. Happy gardening, everybody, and I'll see you next time.